Welcome to the Small Business Sessions podcast from Enterprise Nation's Business Connected training program and our partners Vodafone Business, Constant Contact, Dropbox and JPMorgan. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Elsie Rutterford, co-founder of skincare brand BYBI. The original idea for the business, which stands for BYBI Beauty Insiders, came about after Elsie and her partner Dominica started making their own natural skincare products using food. The brand's products are now sold online and in retailers around the world. During our fascinating chat, we discuss growing a multi-million-pound brand, raising finance, getting stocked in major retailers, personal branding and more. Let's get started. Elsie, big thanks for joining me. Great to meet you and happy to talk about your story. So let's get straight in. Do you want to tell us, how did BYBI happen? How did it all kick off?
We date back about almost 10 years ago now. Myself and my business partner Dominica were working together in kind of corporate sales roles. And we quickly hit it off as sort of office BFFs. I think we both kind of recognised a kindred entrepreneurial spirit in each other. And at the same time, it was the sort of wellness movement was really hitting the UK, being spearheaded by the sort of like food and fitness bloggers. We called them bloggers then. Influencers didn't exist. And we thought that was a really interesting movement. You know, it was kind of like really looking at how you feel your body through food and kind of, you know, suddenly veganism was trendy. And we could see that it was going somewhere, but felt that it was already quite saturated. So we sort of like took the concept of wellness, but then started to think about wellness for your skin. We were both huge beauty junkies and realized that we didn't really know what was in a lot of the beauty products that we were using. So our kind of answer to that was, can we kind of mimic what the food bloggers are doing and get into the kitchen, but rather than making something to eat, to you know, be good for our insides, can we put it on our face? Can we take that avocado smoothie and just slap it all over our faces, basically?
Nice, I love that.
Lots of amazing recipes came out of the back of that. Lots of terrible recipes also came out of the back of that. But we were basically documenting what we were doing, blogging about it, blogging about the recipes. We went on to run events in London to teach people how to make your own skincare using natural ingredients. And we had a book published by Penguin, which is, you know, 100 recipes for your skin. So we were kind of immersed in this idea of natural beauty, of wellness and beauty. But, you know, you don't want to jump into the kitchen every time you need a moisturizer. It's a bit time consuming. So we were like, okay, so we understand a lot about formulation. Now we know what we want in our products. We know what we don't want in our products. What's currently available on the market? And it turned out that actually the natural beauty scene was pretty dusty. You know, you had to go to like Whole Foods to buy something that adhered to the standard of ingredient that we wanted. And that's not really like, you know, that kind of natural food store isn't really like a premium beauty experience. You know, we wanted to go to Selfridges. We wanted to continue to buy and look fantastic. So we thought, can we marry together this idea of kind of modern, vibrant, fresh beauty, but upheld by great ethics around kind of the way it's produced and the ingredients that we use. And that was the big light bulb moment for BYBI, and here we are.
Fantastic. I mean, it's really interesting that you've turned that blog into a real life business, and we'll get on to like blogging in a bit. Yeah. But so once you had that idea, though, what was the challenges you faced turning that idea into an actual thing? Yeah,
I mean, I think the challenges of, we were just talking about product businesses, and the challenges of creating a product business are mainly tied up to begin with around your stock, your inventory, right? So we were hand making a lot of the stuff at that time. But we knew that we had big ambitions in terms of our distribution and where we wanted to be retailed. So there was this kind of moment of, you know, we're going into pitch to ASOS and, you know, Sephora, but actually we're hand making everything in our studio in London. And can we keep up with that demand? But the next leap from hand making is to go out and find a contract manufacturer, and, you know, their minimum order quantities start in the thousands. So there's this huge challenge of, you know, how do you make that leap from made in the kitchen to being produced, you know, by a factory, by machinery, where you can actually scale and you can actually start to fulfill some of these bigger retailers. And then the kind of grey bit in between, where you're sort of like, you place this order with a contract manufacturer and then you've got to wait 9 months for the stock to arrive. So I think that was one of our sort of main challenges, was just how we get our head round actually producing this great product that we'd come up with.
So how did you do that? Like you said, it was in the kitchen, smashed avocado, but you know, you can't do that for all your customers now, can you?
No.
So how did you find like a manufacturer and actually then pay for the initial products?
Yeah, I think like there's a bit of a fake it till you make it kind of attitude, in that, you know, we were going out and pitching to retailers as if we were a really smooth, slick setup. We already had manufacturing partners. You know, there wasn't a hint of handmade still left in the brand, because we wanted them to believe that we would be able to work logistically in a way that a kind of big brand would. I mean, whether they believe that or not, I don't know, but it worked. And then in the background, we were kind of furiously fundraising to get enough capital behind us to be able to basically, front that first order and fulfill some of the kind of pre-orders that we had from these retailers. Because when you start to work with retailers, their payment windows are long. So you have this quite long working capital cycle where you need to pay your factory, but you haven't been paid from your retailer yet, and kind of managing that. So the first bit of funding that we got was a Virgin startup loan. Cannot recommend it enough. Brilliant. Like, we're still very involved with them. And we got the full 25k each as individual founders. So a total of 50k into the business. So that's how we kind of funded that first bit. Going and speaking to contract manufacturers was actually, I think back to some of the early meetings that we did, and I honestly cringe, because we went in thinking we're the customer, they want our business. And actually, that's not the case at all. We should have been on sales pitching mode, because they get contacted by, especially in beauty, by hundreds of small beauty brands day in, day out. They take a chance on working with one, and they have to really see your potential and see that there's the chance for you to grow, because they don't want to be working with, a couple of thousand beauty brands who are each producing 1,000 units at a time. That's not, it doesn't make sense for them. They want you to scale up and they want you to grow. So we did a first couple of meetings with contract manufacturers, never heard back from them. So we were like, right, we're doing something wrong here. And then the next one we found, who went on to be a partner of ours that we stayed with for a long time, we just went in and sold the dream. Here's our ambition. Here's what we're thinking. Here's the funding that we've already got. Here's how we're going to pay for our order. Here are our pre-orders that we've got from retailers. And that dynamic really shifted. They were excited about us. They were excited about our business, and they went on to back us. But they also gave us things like payment terms, which for a business that's not even trading yet is unheard of. Amazing. So really, you've got to be thinking about meetings with suppliers as well as, your customer in that same pitch mode mentality. Because otherwise you won't find a supplier or a partner to work with you.
That tip you just gave, though, on getting a co-founder and then you can get 2 startup loans, that's a great tip for getting money.
Yeah.
Because you're right, it's a personal loan, isn't it? So you can both get it.
It is.
Were they UK manufacturers? Was that important to you that you wanted it to be made in the UK?
It was. And only because I think that the leap into handing over what essentially started as our recipes over to a contract manufacturer, there's quite a process that goes on there where you give them your recipe, essentially, your formulation, and their lab team have to see if they're able to replicate that. It's the same way of baking a cake. Like, you can get 2 chefs and they follow the same recipe, but the outcome will be quite different. And we wanted to match the stuff that we'd been hand making. So that process felt quite, we were really hands-on with it. And I think being UK based was important to us so that we could go and visit them, be there when our first production run was in process, actually kind of like work with the chemists and the lab team to make sure that the quality was there. But that being said, beauty globally, the global production of beauty, there are huge kind of hubs of high standard that aren't within the UK. And we've thought more about, shall we start to produce kind of internationally? It's something that we're talking about quite a lot. A lot of cosmetics, for example, are made in Italy. They're gold standard for it. So it wasn't necessarily that we thought that the UK could do it better than anywhere else. It was more that we wanted that touch point with the manufacturer, that we could jump on a train and be there in 2 hours and actually kind of like be in the lab and work with them, because the formulation was so important to our brand and our product.
So you said you had like retail orders straight away. So what kind of size retailers were they? Did you get big ones initially?
Our first was ASOS.
Wow.
Yeah.
So pretty big then.
Yeah.
So how did you convince, because that's a common question. How do I get into retail, particularly big ones? And convincing someone like that when you officially don't really exist yet.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Yeah. There were a few things at play. So we did have a social presence already. So we'd started, obviously we had the blog, and we had what was called Clean Beauty Insiders. So we'd started to build that. It had myself and my business partners' faces all over it. We were clearly the front of it. And then we'd started a separate kind of social presence for BYBI as a brand. And we've been posting there. We've been posting about the handmade stuff that we were doing. Just we weren't saying that it was handmade, basically. So, we were on the radar. We also ticked quite a few like buzzwords for retailers. Like, they were thinking about natural. It was the clean beauty scene that was sort of taking off. They were thinking about ethically produced. They were thinking about vegan, cruelty-free. So they were kind of actively looking for brands like ours who can kind of like be their big tick box. So we were kind of right place, right time. But we also, and we say this to countless founders that we meet, we took on a PR freelancer from like day dot basically. And she, you know, we paid her a freelancer kind of retainer rather than a huge agency retainer. So it was manageable for us. We'd got the Virgin loan. And she basically worked on just seeding us out to press and influencers. So a lot of the time we would get the likes of ASOS contacting us and saying, you know, I've seen you on the beauty editor of Grazia, like has just done an unboxing of we had this like kind of viral product called Babe Balm. And we sent that out with these little biodegradable glitter sachets ahead of festival season. And you could basically stick the glitter on like with the... And the thing is that with this PR freelancer, she knew them, she had contacts, like it was different to us trying to like pitch up at The Guardian and trying to like drop off some product to journalists who were just like, no way. You know, she had an in, she's got a black book of contacts basically. Best marketing move we made. It attracted the big retailers that we were interested in. And 9 times out of 10, they came to us. They got in touch with us, which was like, wow. Yeah.
You're in then, aren't you?
Yeah.
As a freelancer and a journalist, I'm very happy to hear that freelancer and journalism was what helped. And I think you're right, because I think a lot of founders at the start think, well, I don't want to be in the press yet. I've got nothing to talk about. People don't want to know. But so many buyers I've spoke to and heard from say, we look at social media all the time. We look at the press because they want to be first, don't they, to get the up and coming brand. So you're good that you exploited that.
The world of like journalism and social media and kind of influencer and journalist and editor has really blurred now.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that, especially in the beauty world, that were on our kind of like hit list to target, yes, they worked for a publication, but they also had like pretty big like social media presences themselves as well. They've become influencers like in their own right. So being on their radar is like, you know, if you get a product in front of them that they really like, then you know, there's the social coverage that you can get, but there's also the chance that it might wind up in a publication as well. So it's a smart move to be thinking about those kind of people, but it's very hard to get an in without somebody representing you.
You're now international, so you've got international stockings. You're in Germany, aren't you, in a physical retail outlet? So has that been a similar kind of? Obviously, that's you're now over. So how have you managed to grow to international retail?
So actually our international presence is quite big. So we're in the APAC region. So we work with Sephora in Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, across Europe, where, Germany, France, Scandinavia does really well for us. We've got a huge presence in Finland. And then the US, we've like come back. And we've like burnt our fingers a bit there and are strategizing as to what is the next move for the US. To be honest, I think we went international too early. I think that a better strategy for a product brand is to really cement your home market, to build out a distribution strategy that works and then replicate that in other markets that have kind of like similarities, and then start to think about what a kind of global strategy looks like. We just went like, blah. And as I said, we had people contacting us and we just like, we can't say no. Like,
exactly.
You know, I feel like the lesson of learning to say no as a founder is like a very tough one to learn, but it's a good one, because every opportunity that comes to you, you want to say yes to because it's so exciting and you're thinking about revenue. But actually sometimes things, you know, some of these opportunities will cost more than they're worth. And we learned that the hard way with going into the US, where we partnered with Target, who gave us an 1,800 door count, countrywide launch.
Wow.
And we tried to do that from the UK and it was really tough. And actually what we should have said is, that's great, but can you put us in your top 10% stores first and we'll make it work and then we'll filter down into the rest. Whereas, you know, we didn't have the team, we didn't have the marketing budget. We were all based in the UK. There was a pandemic, we couldn't travel.
Right.
And like learning how to like juggle all of that was very difficult. So I'd say international, don't rush into it unless it makes sense and you've got an infrastructure to support it, and just cement your home market, I think, is more worthwhile.
That's a really good tip. The US story, though, that is so common. So many go, yeah, US, it'd be easy. All speak English, it's the same. Yeah. But it's massive, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you have to think of it as state by state, right? Because like your marketing in, you know, what we saw was we performed really well in like the coastal, so east and west, which you can, you know, make sense. Like California, the natural beauty movement, like, you know, that is it's there. It's been there for a long time. The customer's really attuned to that. You know, places like New York, obviously, like there's a kind of forward-thinking customer who's really interested in that. But the scale is in the middle, and we knew nothing about that customer, and we didn't know how to target them or how to speak to them or how to market to them. And then, yeah, if you're not able to kind of like section it up and target like state by state basically and tweak your message and your marketing, then it's probably not going to be successful across the US as a whole.
Another big thing, obviously, is for you is sustainability. You know, that's at the heart of it. And I wrote down, you launched the world's first carbon negative skincare product, which is quite a big deal. So do you want to talk about why? I mean, it's kind of obvious why, but you know, why you wanted that sustainability and how did you go about launching that product?
Going back to the early days of like going around trying to, you know, pitch to contract manufacturers and find people to produce our product and speaking to packaging suppliers, and, you know, just every meeting we come out of and we'd be like, my goodness, that's strange that they, you know, there's X amount of waste that goes on at this point in the supply chain. Like, it's strange that there's not a tube that exists that's actually recyclable. Like, we just kept feeling like we were coming away and questioning the kind of practices that were going on, and then wound up just feeling like actually there's quite a lot of like unquestioned like bad doing that goes on in the beauty industry when it comes to the environment, that just is just part and parcel of, you know, well, that's just the way we do it, you know. So we felt like we wanted to challenge it. It was tricky though, because you can try and do things in a sustainable way, and we call it the S word because it's greenwash now. It's like, so we like to say responsible. But if you don't have like a mission to center around, it's actually quite tough because, you know, there are quite a few options out there. So as an example, when we were looking at our packaging, you know, you've got PCR, like recycled plastic, or you've got recyclable plastic that's still made from a virgin stock, or you've got like a sugarcane bioplastic. And each one of them has its pros and cons. Like, there's not, you know, there's not necessarily much data to say why one is better than the other. So we needed a kind of mission to center around to help us make some of these business decisions. So we did a lot of digging. We really kind of immersed ourselves in environmentalism and spoke to a lot of environmentalists and really understanding what difference we could make that would have a positive impact. And it just kept coming back to our carbon footprint. You know, I think we speak a lot in the beauty industry about packaging, and I've just done it there, giving you an example of packaging, but packaging is only a tiny bit of the beauty product supply chain. If you think about a beauty product that has upwards of 30, 40 ingredients, each one of those ingredients has come from somewhere in the world with its own supply chain. It's very hard to track all of that. Then they come to somewhere and they're produced by big, big factories who are emitting a lot of carbon. You know, we don't think about the rest of the supply chain. And that was quite important to us to center our mission around reducing carbon footprint, because then when we go back to some of these decisions, so the example that I gave you, our choice is the bioplastic, is the sugarcane bioplastic, because it has the lowest carbon footprint. And there's data behind that. And it might not be the right decision, but at least it's a decision that's being mindful about responsible production. So it was tricky. And then the carbon negative product was the next step from that. Could we, you know, can we take it a step further? Can we actually tip those scales into negative when we're creating a product and then measuring its carbon footprint? And again, it's data. It's like, it's fact. So we really like that. Perfection doesn't exist. We're a consumer brand. We're not sustainable because we're creating product that like 90% of it's going to like wind up in the bin.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. You're right.
We try our best.
Big thanks to Vodafone Business for sponsoring this podcast. VHub from Vodafone Business has supported over 1 million SMEs, providing expert advice on a range of topics that matter to small business owners everywhere. Access VHub for a free one-to-one consultation with an expert advisor and get support tailored to your business. Book your free consultation with a VHub advisor today. Find more details at vodafone.co.uk/VHub. So how's the industry responded? Because, you know, some of the big ones aren't doing as much as you are. So have you kind of heard how, you know, the impact what you're doing is having on the industry?
I think, unfortunately, the consumer isn't there yet.
Right.
Because when you start talking about carbon in the context of beauty products, it's not very sexy. It doesn't, like, you can't see it. You can't feel it. Like, even though we're all experiencing the impact of, you know, the way carbon is literally like heating up our world, is quite an abstract thing to connect to like the footprint of a beauty product, for example. Whereas if you talk about recyclable packaging, you know, the consumer can like touch and feel that. So because the consumer isn't there yet, a lot of the bigger brands will follow what the consumer's going to buy. You know, they're not going to go out of their way to do something if it's not going to yield a financial benefit. So we've not seen a huge amount in terms of uptake around the carbon conversation, although a lot of it is going on in the background for some of the big guys. We hear through a lot of the kind of auditing agencies that we use that they are thinking about it and they are doing something about it. They're starting to measure. They're just not necessarily putting their foot out there and making that a forward-fronting kind of mission yet, because honestly, I don't think the consumer is ready for it, unfortunately.
Back onto funding. I mean, you said you started with a startup loan, but you've had all other types of funding since. Do you want to talk about that and what types you've used and maybe some tips on getting funding?
Yeah. So we've raised like, I think around like 6 million to date through various funding rounds. So we did a kind of like pre-seed of 150K, which was friends and family mainly and kind of small angels. Biggest tip there is make sure you're SEIS registered. Like it kind of becomes a no-brainer for somebody that's looking to invest. Hugely de-risks it for the investor and makes it more accessible for somebody that's wouldn't necessarily deem themselves an angel investor but has a bit of cash that they'd like to put behind something. And, you know, a biggest tip I'd say with that as well, because a lot of the founders that we're speaking to through our consultancy work are around that stage, that kind of pre-seed stage. You just tell everyone that you're fundraising, because honestly, the type of like the people that put in money to our business earlier on was like people that we used to work with, ex-bosses, like an old landlord, like honestly, people that you'd like never expect. They're not investors, but actually they themselves wouldn't know where to start, but they want to put some money into startups. So, you know, just every conversation, every meeting, every person you go to, you say, oh, by the way, do you know, I'm fundraising. Like, I'll send you the pitch deck if you want. Just, it gets so far. So I'd say that's a huge tip. We then went on to do a number of rounds, a kind of combination of like mainly kind of standard venture capital. So we've got like the likes of Unilever Ventures on our cap table, Manzanita Capital, who are kind of big owners of Space NK, high net worth individuals. So quite a sort of rich like mix of people. And we did some sort of like straight up equity investing. We did a couple of bridge rounds as well. We've done a bit of debt fundraising as well, which seems to be more prevalent these days, particularly kind of reflecting the landscape, I guess. And then most recently, we are just tying up basically a majority change in shareholding whereby BYBI will have sort of new owners, as it were. And the two of us stay on in more creative kind of roles and get out of the day-to-day, which has consumed our lives for so many years.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Why did you decide that was the right time for that?
I think the two of us have got the business as far as it can possibly get with our skill set, our network, our contacts, our experience. And we're really proud of that. But I think that kind of startup to scale up stage, you having a kind of stronger infrastructure around you really helps make that leap. You know, we kind of got to the point where the revenue, like we were starting to slow with what we were achieving. And it's like, to get that next kind of like springboard, we needed probably better distribution, better infrastructure around production, better suppliers, better manufacturing partners. So we decided to go to market and see if we could find not just money. It wasn't just like a standard kind of like, you know, raise for working capital or cash. In fact, it was less about the money. It was more about, is there a partner that can take our brand and kind of drop it into their infrastructure? It hasn't kind of been released yet, so I can't say who it is just yet, but it's a founder who owns a very large UK-based beauty company and has that infrastructure in place. You know, he owns factories, he owns warehouses. So like overnight, our cost of goods has come down. You know, our cost of logistics has come down, so we can see an improvement on margin. So we've got more to spend on marketing so that we can start to really expand. We can look at the US again. So I think it was just the right stage. You know, BYBI's 7 years old now, and it needed that kind of gear shift to move it on to the next stage.
Wow, exciting.
Yeah.
So look forward to find out who that is.
Yeah.
Just back onto finance. I mean, it's a point that's discussed a lot about female founders, and there's awful statistics about, was it £1 in every pound VC money goes to female founders.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? You've raised money as female founders. What are your thoughts on that debate?
The kind of problem lies in two kind of areas, or two stages of like the fundraising funnel. I think that there are just simply not enough women coming to market trying to raise investment. So we need to look at the top of the funnel and why there aren't as many female business owners, putting themselves and their businesses out there and trying to raise capital. Is it because less females are actually starting businesses? Is it because they don't feel confident enough to go after investment? Is it because they don't need it? That's I think just like looking at that funnel and that top of funnel and kind of like the amount of people that are coming in there and making sure that there's enough kind of diversity at that stage. We actually didn't have a problem sort of then attracting and closing investment because a lot of investors are now very, they've heard that stat. They're very conscious of that and wanting to back females. I think actually where we found it more challenging is like continuing to have a voice like post the investment closing and, really thinking about the type of people that you bring on to support your business by investing, and then how that working relationship kind of like pans out further down the line, and whether that support for female founders stays as true as it did when you were kind of like pitching and they wanted to put sort of money behind you. So like, I think that's where we found more challenging situations is like not experiencing basically like sexism among, I don't want to say, I don't want to like point any fingers, but like as it's gone on, as like our, as we've run the business and within our kind of like the many different stakeholders that we have, not just our investors, but the stakeholders that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, I'll be transparent and say we often are faced with, we're often in situations where I don't think we would be treated the same if we were two men, about being taken seriously and having a voice that's heard. And, I can reel off like hundreds of anecdotes about the things that have been said to us as the kind of, we often get called the BYBI girls, which really like irks me. So I think that that's a challenge. It's actually like a bit further on. It's like the cash is there and it is being deployed more now towards female founders if they're coming to market looking for it. But it's then how they continue to have like a strong voice in the running of their business and in the kind of day to day without feeling that they're being discriminated against because of being female.
I mean, personal branding has been, you've said it right at the start. Like you said, the reason you got, your faces were very much associated with the brand immediately before it even launched.
Yeah.
And you've continued that throughout. You've written a book, you've got the blogs, you kept the blog going. So is that a tip you'd offer to founders, is to make your personal brand as important as the brand itself?
I think so. I think only if it's appropriate and like relevant and like not doesn't feel forced, and also only if you feel comfortable with it. I said right at the start that the two of us are from sales backgrounds. Like we are like sales people through and through. We were always pitching like way before kind of our entrepreneurial days. We're really used to being in that sales environment, and I think that is a certain like type of personality that doesn't mind being kind of out, fronting a brand, basically. We know how to pitch our brand, we know how to sell our brand. We're the best people to do it. Actually, trying to pass it to somebody else wouldn't make sense. But not every personality type is like that. We come across a lot of founders who find that idea of like fronting their brand absolutely terrifying. So there's either you kind of try and overcome that and step into it, or you say, actually, maybe not. Maybe I have just a great like right-hand person who is more of the kind of face of. But I think a face of is really useful, just to give your customers and your consumers something to kind of connect with. We're less kind of on the face of things these days, but 9 times out of 10, any email that goes out, any social post that goes out that we're in, we'll have the best engagement, these are people that don't know us from our clean beauty days, but they like to see a face in front of a brand because it's human and it gives them something to relate to.
Because, doing research always for guests, I look on the About Us page and you've got a video about your story, which, speaking as a journalist, also is so important. So many people forget about the story, the about us, but journalists will always look for that. And from that, you can see that there's a story and there's people. And so, yeah, it is really important. Just very briefly, back to the blogging, because, you know, a lot of people probably blog or like to blog and like make money from a blog. And you've done that right at the start and you've continued to keep it going. So what are your tips on sort of blogging as a business?
I will say that we don't do it as much. We don't do it at all these days, but
right.
That has been more. You know what? I think it's interesting that where we started to slow down on the content production and content kind of creation was where our business shifted away from the kitchen table and into being a product brand, and other people were making it and stuff. So the content that we originally were producing was recipes and, you know, like tips on natural beauty and that kind of thing. And that started to feel less and less kind of relevant to us. You know, I will be really open now and say I don't make avocado face masks in my kitchen anymore. I'm so sorry, but I don't have the time to. You know, I'm a mum now. Like it's difficult. So I think we started to feel less connected to the content that we were producing, and that Clean Beauty Insiders kind of brand in itself. And then we got to a point where we were like, well, if we're not connecting to it, maybe it's not the right thing for where we are in our journeys now. And actually what we found these days connects much more is kind of content around being a business owner. Because that's what we've moved into, right? We moved away from being people making coffee scrubs at the kitchen table, and our lives are now the ins and outs of being entrepreneurs and being business owners. And there's an audience, you know, much like the audience of this podcast, I'm sure, who really connect with that. And you know, I said to you earlier, we've gone on to kind of do a consultancy, and we're kind of like, you know, we have a bit of time now to help business owners, and the content that we're kind of coming up with around that it feels way more authentic. I hate that word, but it feels truer to where we are in our journey now. So yeah, I think like what we've found in terms of like content production overall, whether it's like writing a blog or like filming TikToks or whatever, as long as it's like true to your journey and where you are, people will connect with that. I think if we were still trying to like make clean beauty recipes now, people would probably see through it and know that our hearts weren't in it.
You're not really doing that.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And just finally, and that's the classic question, but what would be your ultimate business tip from everything you've told us? One thing that founders should take away from your story? I
think, you know, perhaps I haven't touched on it because sometimes the story from the outside looks really shiny and looks like it was a cinch and, you know, oh yeah, we did this fundraising and we got this, you know, retail and whatever. But actually underneath it all, being a founder is really, really hard. It's gritty and it's raw and there's ups and downs. And there have been like rock bottom points and like euphoric high points. And I think like knowing that that's what you're going to go through as a founder, kind of coming into it with that expectation might make things kind of easier to deal with the challenges. And actually, if you're able to look at your challenges, your obstacles, your failures, your mistakes as opportunities and possibilities to either learn, or can you spin something, you know, all right, we messed up there, we over ordered this amount of product, like that's going to cost us this much money, but like how can we turn that into an opportunity? And myself and Dominica spend a lot of time doing that kind of like problem solving, like not trying not to look at mistakes as mistakes, but like just a creation of an opportunity. That mindset, I would say, is like really helpful to keep you sane and like for your mental health, because it's a tough world out there as a founder. It is really, really difficult. And sometimes you question everything you do, but just like having conviction on the decisions that you make, you know, seeing, your mistakes or your failures as the chance to kind of learn and improve, and like keeping a smile on your face is probably what I would recommend. Brilliant way to end. Well, Elsie, thank you so much for telling us your story. Pleasure. I look forward to hearing what you do next. Thank you. And thank you for joining us on the Small Business Sessions. Thanks so much. You've been watching Enterprise Nation's Small Business Sessions podcast, powered by Business Connected and our partners Vodafone Business, Constant Contact, Dropbox and JPMorgan. If you've been inspired during this episode, head to enterprisenation.com/business connected to register for webinars and to access free business training. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.